Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby.
Well, today of all day, today is Monday, and we have so much news, I don't know where to start. In the studio with us, we have Judge Richard Weinberg, we have Congressman Peter King, and a special guest, a good friend. He was with the Trump administration, Mr. Peter Navarro. Welcome.
Hey, this is wonderful. You had a beautiful day here in the Big Apple, and I am in the Red Apple, Johnny. Rita couldn't be more pleased. Remember seeing Rita at the convention, and it all gets done right here on this show.
Absolutely. And there's so much news. Where do you start off, Rita?
Well, first of all, I do want to say it's so great seeing Peter, a former White House manufacturing czar, also new book, the new MAGA deal. And you got the biggest applause there when you were at the RNC because you had just gotten out. You had been in prison. And boy, were you... Unfairly, exactly. When you got out, it was, I'll tell you, it was a thunderous applause. Everybody loved seeing you at the RNC. So
heartwarming and walking out. It was literally 10 hours from the prison door to the stage of the RNC, and I didn't know what to expect, but people were just so wonderful.
Well, you made me cry when you brought out your gal. That was so beautiful.
She's a sweetheart.
And you know China all too well. This is a huge issue. Of course, we got the VP debate, you guys, tomorrow night, and let's see if Vance takes it to Tim Walz over China, something you know very well, Peter.
It's very interesting if you compare the two, because people should be afraid. I don't know if you know this, but 15 of the last 46 vice presidents have actually become president. So you gotta, it's not short odds when it comes to Walz or Vance being president at some point. And it should scare anyone who's concerned about communist China as an existential threat. When Walz was a kid, he had pictures of Mao Zedong in his bedroom. Weird. When he was 23 years old, he began what would be over 30 trips to Beijing and the rest. He got married in Kunming, and you can't make this up. You know what his anniversary date is? He chose this. The anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre,
oh my God,
June 4th. He chose
And I understand he's been back to China 30 times on his anniversary.
Yes.
To celebrate Tiananmen Square.
Which was a horrible reminder.
It was a terrible massacre, and it was the turn. 89 was the turn of China into communism. The U.S. made a mistake in foreign policy and not doing some of the time. But Walz, okay, he's making money hand over fist over there, but the bigger picture is that's what the Chinese communists do. They have this thing called elite capture. They use their money, appointments, whatever, to capture academics, businessmen, politicians like Walz, and then they get big payoffs by these people kind of kowtowing to them. And now this guy, if he gets elected, he'll be a heartbeat away from the Oval Office. And meanwhile, the interesting thing is J.D. Vance, right? Well, Walz is honeymooning and making money hand over fist in communist China. J.D. Walz is home with his mother in a community which is absolutely being hammered by communist Chinese economic aggression. There's people losing their jobs. Factories are shutting down. People are dying of fentanyl and heroin. And nobody knows better at the front lines than J.D. Vance of the damage and carnage communist China does. And meanwhile, Walz, they call it Comrade Tim, when they're not calling him Tampon Tim. Comrade Walz over there is saying, oh, this is a great country. I've never been more impressed with anything. I'll never have a better time.
Understand. Why, and I'm going to ask the same thing from John Solomon later. Why is the intelligence outfit that the 51 guys that signed that it was a false Hunter Biden
false flag.
Yes, it was Russian disinformation.
They're signing on to endorse Harris.
It's deja vu all over again. I remember when
the intelligence people an oxymoron.
The deep state is deeply committed to everything Donald Trump doesn't stand for. They're the globalists who want the interactions with the rest of the world. They don't think about America first. And so you get these folks, when they're not in government, they're in think tanks paid for on the government and globalist dime. And that's the kind of thing they do. Remember, it wasn't just, it was the two institutions that tried to take Donald Trump down before he even got to the Oval Office with things like the Russia hoax was the FBI, right?
Yeah.
Right? And it was the intelligence community. And I've been in the Oval Office when they've been in there briefing the president on Communist China. And it's like, why do we not release the real information people want to know? All you're telling me is what we're reading in the New York Times. Meanwhile, you're sitting on this stuff that would really educate the American people and allow action to be taking place. But no, it's crazy stuff.
It is crazy. By the way, I also want to talk about the port strike because that is looming. There could be this massive port strike all up and down the East Coast. Also Texas, too, as well is involved in this. And the deadline is 7 hours away at this point. John, you had something really interesting. John was on Fox News today. And you had some bombshell stuff, John, where you talked about why Biden has been asked about it, and Biden is not intervening. It's interesting.
Well, I don't understand. The president of the United States, a Democrat, and the election is only 35 days away, Peter. And normally you would intervene the Taft-Hartley Act and put it away till after the election. But my opinion is that there was a coup in the United States of America. I think Joe Biden and his wife Jill realized they've been couped, and nobody talks about the coup. And Nancy Pelosi and President Obama and maybe some other leaders said to President Biden, "We're not going to support you. You're going to get out in disgrace, and you have to say you're not going to run."
There's a lot of things going on in this strike. A lot of people think it might be about wages, which it certainly is.
Oh, it's always about wages, but
there's a bigger issue here. This is about automation and artificial intelligence and timing.
Timing.
Look, if you're sitting there in the White House, whenever these kinds of things happen near elections, you've got to weigh this. It's like if you do Taft-Hartley, you may alienate the labor unions. If you don't, then you get all of these economic crises. I think, look, John, there'll be a little bit of pain and then Biden will throw the lifeline, make her squirm. I think you're absolutely right in your read that he hates her. And his wife hates Kamala Harris even more because Kamala Harris stuck the knife in both of them. I get that. But this strike has the potential, much greater potential than even the auto worker strike, of reigniting inflation at a time when Jerome Powell, with his interest rate cut, just put kerosene on the inflationary fire. So we're playing with very dangerous situation here.
Yeah,
really, really scary stuff. And by the way, I understand, John. We've got John Solomon now calling in.
Well, let's take John.
Breaking news, WABC.
And joining us now with some big breaking news is the founder of Just the News, John Solomon. John, what do you got?
Well, just a few minutes ago, the House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer subpoenaed the Department of Homeland Security, saying that they possess records, according to whistleblowers, that has incriminating information about Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's China connections. Remember, he spent a lot of time teaching in China. There's been some questions. How does a man in the U.S. military get to teach in China, where the communist government often imposes restrictions? Comer suggesting that the Homeland Security Department has some major information that needs to be known by the American public before it votes on November 5th.
Wow. Do we know what that is? I mean, obviously he did all those visits, which was interesting.
We don't know a lot. The question is whether or not he was knowledgeable that he was facilitating China's efforts to weaken the United States or to do things that would be malicious to the United States or to put China in a better position with the United States. That's the general outlines of it, but nothing specific yet. We do know that they do have two whistleblowers, though, that have been blowing the whistle, telling the committee there is such information.
Wow. What about also former Intel officials apparently are now endorsing Harris? It sounds like the laptop seems to be Russian disinformation. I feel like it's like the campaign all over again.
That's right. Deja vu all over again. Yes, U.S. intelligence operatives once again putting their thumb on the scale of an election, doing a letter in the last couple of days endorsing Kamala Harris and suggesting that she's the only person capable of governing the world and taking several strikes or blows at Donald Trump. A lot of people see in this, including Donald Trump's former chief of staff at the National Security Council, a deja vu moment where intel officials, like they did in 2020, tried to interfere in the election by suggesting Hunter Biden's laptop wasn't real when, of course, it was. So another letter, another controversy 4 years apart.
John Solomon, I think it's an oxymoron calling these people intelligence officials.
Yes, they were trained by us. They are trained in our skills.
They are trained,
a lot of times,
they are trained to, I know something about the intelligence world. They are trained to lie.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is they're also supposed to be apolitical. And, of course, our intelligence community has become a lot more political in recent years.
I just can't believe how they're going to support her when she really, she might be a nice lady. I'm not going to say anything. She might be a very nice, but I don't think she has the international ability to be president.
Well, listen, all you have to do is compare her 4 years on the watch with the 4 prior years. The world is much more aflame today. There's no doubt about it. Russia, Iran, acting badly on the Biden-Harris watch and not acting so badly during the Trump years. I think a lot of people see in that history a real problem for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, John, we just have about a minute or so left. You had a blockbuster story about the Dirty Dozen, these jurisdictions where election issues are looming. And also DOJ, this is amazing, is suing Alabama.
They are.
And they're purging non-citizen voters close to the election. You would think that's a good thing. And the Biden DOJ is suing Alabama.
Yeah, more than a half dozen states have found non-citizens on their voter rolls recently. They've been trying to remove them. When Alabama did, the Justice Department came in and tried to stop and block them. That just happened over the weekend. We had that covered at Just the News. There's a lot of other things, too. The Justice Department sued 2 small Wisconsin towns for going back to paper ballots, saying that you got to have machines or you're violating the Disabilities Act. A lot of people in disbelief over that litigation. And then all across the country, in addition to non-citizen voting issues, there are a lot of other concerns. In Madison, Wisconsin, just a couple of days ago, 2,250 duplicate ballots were sent out, meaning 2 absentee ballots were sent to the same home. That's a ripe condition for fraud, and members of Congress, Tom Tiffany among them, saying, how can this be? How can we be doing such silly things? A lot of election jurisdictions having a lot of blunders even before the election takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, John Solomon, thank you so much. Great stuff, John. Keep us posted on all these fronts. Great to have you.
Thanks. Good to be with you as well.
Thank you so much.
Wow. That was a blockbuster there, John, where he talked also about Comer subpoenaing to try to get details about Tim Walz.
By the way, we have a new guest in the studio.
We love that. And a great guest, by the way.
A great guest, and he's previewing his book tonight. We have a big book party in New York. Robert Unanue, and he's the CEO of Goya Foods, and a real international businessman that knows how, if there's a problem with the port strike, how is that going to affect you?
Well, John, it's going to be a big effect, but let me first congratulate you on your ratings. WABC, you're taking it to new heights.
Oh, you saw them already?
Oh, my goodness. I hear about 5.1, something like that.
Oh. Wow, you know it all. You know it all.
Of course, hey, you got to be on your toes here.
It would be 5.2 with both you and Peter Navarro in the studio. You know that, Bob.
Yeah.
I'll bring in John Concha, too.
Yeah, and we have Joe Concha now joining us.
John Concha.
I know so many
I'm
names.
calling everybody John. It's okay.
I don't blame him. John's a good name. We like that.
Well,
Let's go to Joe Concha, if we could, who is Fox News media analyst. And we are lucky to have Bob Unanue, Peter Navarro also with us in studio, Joe. Also, former Congressman Peter King, Judge Weinberg, John, and me. We got a full house here, Joe. We miss you. First off, we're talking about the debate tonight. New rules for the debate.
Not tonight, tomorrow.
I mean, tomorrow night. Now I'm confusing days. You're confusing names. I'm confusing days. Tomorrow night, of course, the big one tomorrow night. And this could be the last one because so far it doesn't look like another presidential one's going to happen. Your thoughts, Joe?
You remember when Mike Tyson fought Michael Spinks 1988 and it was over in 91 seconds? J.D. Vance will be Tyson, and Spinks will be in the role of Governor Walz. And the reason why I say this, and I'm using a boxing analogy here, guys, is because Tim Walz has yet to take one uncomfortable or tough question since he became Kamala's running mate many weeks ago. Hasn't done one national interview solo on his own. He had to be there with Kamala at one time on CNN. So this is somebody who's had no sparring, no training, hasn't taken even a jab to the jaw at this point. And now he's going to go on the debate stage for 90 seconds with J.D. Vance, who, with all due respect to Donald Trump, J.D. Vance is an excellent debater, probably the better of the two. I went back and watched his debates against Tim Ryan when he ran for the Senate a couple of years ago. He is cool, he is comfortable, and he is concise. Tim Walz isn't going to know what hit him. And since 60 million people will be watching, to your point, guys, there won't be another presidential debate. This is the last big moment, the last big event of this campaign. And if this is the last impression voters are going to get when they say they see Tampax Tim Walz, this 80s goofy sitcom dad, that's the way he comes across, I think this is going to be a big, big turning point in this election.
Peter King.
Yeah, Joe, this is Pete King. First of all, it's always great to have you on.
Hey, Pete.
I was in Congress with Walz. I mean, this is the mismatch of the century. I wouldn't even compare him to Spinks. I don't know who I compare him to.
Spanx.
Yeah. Some Golden Gloves are going in the ring against Tyson. This is going to be a total mismatch, and Walz is, to me, like a big buffoon, to be honest with you.
And that's right, Pete. And plus, even if you look at the styles here, and in Walz, there's already leaks coming out that he's worried and he's nervous in terms of the way he's going to do. The issues are on the side of J.D. Vance and, by extension, Donald Trump. When you look at the economy, when you look at crime, when you look at the border, immigration, and foreign policy, it's already lined up for J.D. And as long as he avoids he should fact check J.D. Vance. I'm sorry, Tim Walz, because here's the thing. CBS has just said that they are not going to fact check during this debate. Thank God, because ABC did it, and it was 5 for Donald Trump and it was 0 for Kamala Harris. They're going to stay out of it. They say the candidates should fact check each other. So you know what's coming here, guys. You're going to hear Tim Walz say that Donald Trump wants a federal ban on abortion. He doesn't. That he wants to ban IVF. He does not. That Donald Trump is a supporter of Project 25. He is not. That the Trump tax cuts only benefit the rich. They do not. He's got to be ready for it. He's got to fact check Walz on the fly, and that should throw him off completely to the point where, again, you're right. This is going to be a rhetorical bloodbath.
Joe Navarro here. What do you think JD's going to do with respect to challenging Walz on his communist Chinese ties? Because, as you probably know, they go deep in terms of business and trips and all of that.
Yeah, you got to bring that up, right? I mean, this is obviously a very big deal. You could hit Walz on so many different things, Peter, right? The communist ties, obviously, stolen valor, saying he served in a war zone. He did not. He ditched his unit when they were deployed to Iraq. You could hit him with that. He let Minneapolis burn in 2020, didn't call in the National Guard until it was far too late, $1 billion worth of damage. And, again, I have a son that's in third grade elementary school. I probably wouldn't like it if his boys' room suddenly had tampon machines in it, and that's what they have in Minnesota for boys in elementary school. So there are so many openings here, Peter.
I can't figure that one out. Why would they have tampons in the men's room?
What's the matter? You're not politically correct, John?
I know. Men could get pregnant, I guess. I guess little boys could get pregnant. It's insanity.
That's how they identify that day.
That's right.
Yeah, it is. One thing I think is going to happen, Joe Concha, is the fact that the mics are going to be open. I found that really interesting. We were just talking earlier about that. That's a whole different rule, because in the presidential debate, it was like, okay, the X time, they couldn't talk over each other. They are opening the mics. So I think Tim Walz is going to try to kind of do rapid fire so much, with whatever, try to spin. That's where it's going to get interesting. I actually wish it wasn't going to be open mics.
Yeah, because there's going to be a lot of interruptions, a lot of crosstalk, and you don't get anywhere with that. I like the closed mic scenario. Do we know if there's an audience? Because I don't think there is.
No audience.
Yeah, which I don't quite understand that rule. But again, these are the things that Trump and Vance agreed to, and it's fine because it doesn't matter even under these conditions. I think that we're already seeing these real trends now as far as Trump having a momentum at his back. When you look at state polling, like he's leading in Pennsylvania right now. He wasn't within 7-8 points in 2016 or 2020. So whenever you see a poll and Trump is tied, that really means that he's up 4 or 5 points, and it just looks like things are going his way. And I think the reason why, guys, because I look at the Democratic coalition of the past, and the types of votes that they got to get over the finish line to win elections. And unions always led that. And when you hear the Teamsters support Trump, rank and file, 2-1, then you got to believe that extends to steel workers, UAW workers, restaurant workers, and all those unions. If Trump has them, and he's gained significantly among Hispanics and blacks, you tell me outside of single women where Kamala Harris's votes come from to win this election. I just don't see her past.
Yeah, interesting. Joe Concha?
Where are the polls coming from?
Various ones, right? Like Gallup, for example, John. They have Donald Trump forecasted to be a 3-point winner in the popular vote. They have been insanely accurate in predicting the popular vote victor, like within a percentage point over the last 7 or 8 elections. If they have Trump up 3 nationally, that means he's winning. That means he's winning every swing state, maybe even states like Virginia and New Jersey.
Wow.
That's how bad that is.
And everybody, we're talking to Fox News media analyst Joe Concha. Judge Weinberg.
Joe, I want to ask you about the New York Times editorial lauding Nasrallah. What was that all about? How could they be apologists saying he's a statesman who wanted to have freedom of religion for all religions, Christians, Jews, and Muslims in a united Palestine? What was that about, and what's wrong with the New York Times?
Oh, the paper of record, right? I mean, what's wrong with them? There's just been something wrong with them ever since World War II, right? And look at their coverage of Nazi Germany way back when. This has been a problem for them for some time. But look, they just endorsed Kamala Harris today. Wow, what a shock. This is the same paper that endorsed McGovern, Humphrey, Carter twice, Mondale, who won 1 state, and Michael Dukakis, John Kerry, Al Gore, Hillary Clinton. So, their endorsement, they really have quite the track record when it comes to picking winners. And I think Donald Trump should take this as a badge of honor. Like, good, they didn't endorse me. Now I got a shot.
Wow. Well, Joe Concha, thank you very much. Let's see what happens tomorrow night. Boy, oh boy. Thanks so much. And everybody, after we come back on the Cats and Cosby, we are going to be talking to Congressman Rich McCormick about Biden undercutting Israel at their most pivotal time. And we're going to be talking more with Peter Navarro and Bob Unanue.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Cats and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Cats and Cosby. Of course, Israel on the throes of beginning their ground invasion into Lebanon. And as this is coming, President Biden was asked about it, and he said he's not happy, and he says there should be a ceasefire now. Not supporting Israel right now in this critical time. Joining us now is Congressman Rich McCormick, Republican from the great state of Georgia. Congressman, really great to have you here on the show. And your reaction to this Biden just so waffly on Israel. Look at what happened. We were just talking about what's happened. Israel in the last 6 weeks has taken out more terrorists it seems like than America has in 20 years.
Are you saying that Israel is terrorizing the terrorists?
That's what Biden sure feels like.
Just checking it out.
Yeah, exactly. Your thoughts, Congressman?
Yeah, so Biden's administration has been impossible to deal with when it comes to foreign discipline at all. I mean, I'm a guy who's been to about 50 different countries. I've been in the military for over 20 years. If you look at his weakness, it's led to war, literally war. It doesn't matter if you talk about Ukraine, Israel, what could potentially happen in Taiwan. People pay attention when you're all about appeasement, when you're actually taking away sanctions, when you're giving terrorist nations like Iran money. That's how they funded Hezbollah. That's how they funded Hamas and the Houthis. They've been encouraged and emboldened to actually encourage the people they give weapons to fire on American troops. We lost 3 Georgians in the National Guard who were hit by a drone created in Iran, supported by Iran. We watched what happened in Israel happen because of weak leadership from Biden. They want a super peace at the worst possible time. These guys have encouraged terrorism all over the world. They've supplied our enemies all over the world. And to tell Israel to cease fire at a critical juncture when they're actually doing something with intelligence, something we don't do, by the way. We have better intel than Israel. We just never act on it. That's the difference. They actually make decisive actions. That's why they were successful historically in places like Entebbe, Uganda. They take huge risk doing this, but they actually defeat the enemies for us many times. Are we waiting for Iran to become a nuclear power before we do something? Why not level those places that produce those weapons and used against us and our allies? Why not sink their Navy every time we're fired on, when our naval vessels are fired on by their weapons? Our weaknesses led to war, quite frankly.
And Congressman, this is Peter Navarro.
Hey, Congressman, I want to ask you if you remember the Vietnam War when they had the tunnels of Cu Chi and how that led to basically the downfall. We've got a similar situation going on 26 square miles, I think, in Gaza, but they have like 1,000 miles of tunnels or so. You cannot get out of Gaza until you destroy all those tunnels. Are you on that same page? Are you aware of just how dangerous those tunnels are, which were used for the October 7th, by the way, terrorism?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, if you study warfare and you study why America's lost in Vietnam, why we lost in Afghanistan, why we did very poorly in Iraq until we did surge ops, anytime you put the gloves on and try to teach limited warfare, where you have to say the most powerful nation in the world has to play by some rules that nobody else plays by, that's a recipe for failure. It's a way to draw out a war, lose popular support, lose a war against third-rate armies and terrorists. When you pretend like you're going to do something better by taking it easy on these guys, by suing for peace, as if that's ever worked. It's never worked. It always sets them up for better success against us when you allow them to breathe, when you take your foot off their neck and say, oh, yeah, I understand innocent people might die, so therefore we're not going to do anything. We forget that when we were successful, when we were in World War II, 100,000 people, innocent people died in one night. I hate that. But that's war. War is a horrible thing. You're never going to have a clean war. I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. Name me one war where innocent people didn't die. And if you want to continue to be soft on terror, if you want to continue to allow them to use their strengths against us and make them our weaknesses, we are going to lose this war against terror, and it's going to cost a lot more people their lives. It's going to cause a lot more terrorism in the United States, where we had 2 million people come across the border in the last 3.5 years that we don't even know who they are. We know we've caught a record number of terrorists, but we have 2 million people we haven't even identified. I guarantee you there's a whole bunch of bad guys that came across the southern border that mean to do us harm, and our weakness is going to come back on us and haunt us into the years to come.
Absolutely. Congressman, thank you very much. Congressman Rich McCormick from Georgia, thank you. And we're also keeping everybody in Georgia in our thoughts and prayers, too, with all the damage from the storm there, too. Great to have you. You got to come back on again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Semper Fi.
Thank you. Semper Fi. Thank you for your service, sir. Thank you very, very much.
Well, can we go to the hot news of the day before we go to the CEO of Goya?
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
And workers at ports from Maine to Texas, John, are set to strike tonight. We were talking about this at the top. It could be the most disruptive walkout to the U.S. economy in decades. We'll keep you posted on that. Also, search and recovery efforts are underway across the Southeast after Hurricane Helene. At least 35 people are dead in Asheville, North Carolina area, where the flooding is described as biblical, and 2 million people at least are without power. And those are the big headlines, John.
Yes, they are. And let's go to the CEO of Goya right now. And Robert Yananaway, tell us, we got so many problems in the world. Me and you, we used to talk about the Suez Canal. We used to talk about the Panama Canal. We used to talk about the Red Sea. That's still closed, the Red Sea. And what happens if there's a port strike? I mean, what's going to happen to the price of food?
Well, John, it's a domino effect. What happened during COVID with, and this really started with this administration, their war on the fossil fuel, the Green New Deal. Like we're just talking about the weakness around the world, which kind of enabled Putin to go into Ukraine, which was a breadbasket for Europe and Africa. Inflation skyrocketed, transportation skyrocketed, and, salaries too, for an average warehouse job, it might have been $9 a few years ago. Now it's double that. So you have the domino effect with the ILA, the longshoremen, and it's going to reverberate through our economy. The other thing is in this, and I want to point out, is Hispanic Heritage Month, which runs from September 15th to October 15th. Stephen Colbert jokingly referred to this Heritage Month was jumps from September to October that even our holidays jump a border. And that was Stephen Colbert. It's not too funny. But during Hispanic Heritage Month, the United States is the largest consumer of trafficking. Drugs and trafficking are the only businesses that have really prospered in the last 4 years. And women are 70% of people trafficked. The Latino is the biggest victim of trafficking. And we're allowing this. We're not inviting people into this country. We're bringing people into this country to be exploited, to be sold. And, the U.S. is the middleman in all this. So we're inviting people to come in, some good people, a lot of criminals, and a lot of people who are going to be exploited. And so, this is something that is pure evil. I can't understand how you have an administration, and in tomorrow's debate, I don't know if they'll ask about it, but that where 70% of people trafficked are women, and we had women guarding our borders, but we are making money off of that. So we're inviting people into this country. I've worked 48 years. I don't know what my Social Security check is, but the average Social Security check is $1,200. People come into this country, they haven't worked a second or at all, then they probably won't, receiving over $3,800 in benefits. In California, they floated $150,000 interest-free loans for mortgages. That was killed. But we are working all day for someone else not to work. And this has guess what? The unions are in trouble because their members pay dues. But all the people coming into this country that we're giving all this money to, they don't pay dues. So the unions are losing their effectiveness. They're losing their reason for being. Jobs, we can't get people to work. And so they're going to have a big problem. Part of the issue with the union is they don't want automation of the ports, everything going automatic. But they also want the salaries way up. And actually, real income has not grown with the cost of everything going up so far. Real income is not keeping pace with the cost of things.
Yeah,
but
this is so much. We're in for a really, really bad haul. Peter Navarro, real quick.
Just quickly, that was a beautiful discussion of the border on this wage issue. Please understand that we haven't had stagnant real wages since the stagflation in the 1970s. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris brought this upon us by actions that they took. Kamala Harris in particular broke 2 tie-breaking votes and brought in the inflation because of those budget-busting bills. So they own it, and it's part of what's driving that strike now that's going to shut things down.
Which could make things disastrous. Peter Navarro, thank you. Bob, you guys stick with us. We're going to go to a quick break. Matt Whitaker right after the break.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby, and big news today on the legal front. The man accused in the assassination attempt against former President Trump at that Florida golf course, he was in court. He pleaded not guilty. His attorney says he wants a jury trial. So where's this headed, and a lot more? Joining us now is the former acting attorney general under then President Trump, Matt Whitaker. Matt, we love having you on the show, my friend. Your thoughts my first thought is he working towards like an insanity defense? Is that where you think this is headed, this case with the shooter in Florida? Hey, Matt, can you hear us? We're working on getting Matt. Judge, what do you think as we're trying to get Matt here? I think he's working towards an insanity defense.
It's the obvious first ploy.
That's really all he has, I think.
That's right. I agree with the congressman. It's the obvious first ploy. Now, whether he gets away with it is something else. But I don't think he's insane. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. The standard in the law is to know what you're doing, the consequences of what you're doing. And I think he satisfies that legal test.
Yeah, and
Judge, let me ask you a question.
He sat outside for 12 hours. How could you say it's not premeditation?
If they didn't fire a shot, Can he make up a story about not being there? Maybe he went there to scare or expose the lack of security. Is that a viable defense?
The argument's going to be made, and I'm not saying I buy into it, but the argument, Peter, is made that since he didn't fire a shot, it really wasn't an attempt yet. That he had to do something a little bit more than stay in the woods.
The note, that's where that letter comes through. That letter that was put out that is kind of controversial.
That might not be. I agree he's going to be convicted, but it's not a
slam dunk.
It's not
a slam dunk.
Legally, it's not.
The problem is you need to do something. Legally. You need to. The general standard is you need to do something more. Yeah. Exactly, Peter. An overt act.
So where do you think this is headed, you guys? I mean, do you believe that indeed they'll have enough? Look, I go back to that letter because that's why the DOJ claims that they released that letter, Attorney General Merrick Garland, because in it said, "Hey, I'm so sorry, Iran, I didn't finish the job. I'll put out the 150 bounty."
The interesting thing is if you can't get him on attempted murder, maybe you get him on conspiracy to murder, and you do that by showing an agreement by two or more people to do an illegal act. Okay. So now the question is who that other party would be.
And let's bring in Matt Whitaker. We just got him back here on the line. Matt, your thoughts about this guy pleading not guilty. This is the Florida shooter on the golf course. What do you? I think he's headed towards maybe a insanity plea. Where do you think he's going?
This is obviously the very first step on. They superseded his indictment to include the assassination attempt, and so I think. They probably even haven't thought about how to defend this. It's indefensible, and that's why the judge decided to keep him in jail because I don't think anybody thinks he's going to be not guilty ultimately of the charges. It'll be interesting. I mean, he looks, by all accounts, to not be all there. And it sounds like he was very erratic when he went to Ukraine. But at the same time, I mean, this is kind of we'll see ultimately what they end up doing with him.
Peter Navarro has a question for you, Matt.
I want to know who's paying his legal bills because he's got some really high-priced talent there working for him, Matt. And he didn't act alone, I guess, maybe.
Well, that's all going to come out eventually, right? But I think right now, everything I've read says he has, court-appointed lawyers. Now, in my experience, it's not just the public defender. Court-appointed attorneys can be people from what they call the pool. And really high-profile cases, they can usually get pretty good defense lawyers to take the $85 an hour or whatever they pay public defenders and pool attorneys. And so you can get, for the right case, you can get pretty talented lawyers that'll want to take it because the judges kind of have a way to, pick attorneys to handle a high-profile defendant.
All right. And Matt, we just have like 1 minute left real quick on the Engoron case here, because that's the other big case where the big civil penalties, $400 million plus. And I thought last week we were talking about the appeals, judges. They seemed kind of sympathetic that this was clearly over the top by New York. I mean, that was a good sign for Trump.
No doubt. The New York Court of Appeals, we've had all sorts of questions like we've asked is, no one claimed to be harmed. It sounds like a commercial dispute where, is this outside of the Attorney General's jurisdiction? Do we need to impose guardrails? The court asked on the Attorney General because of how far afield they've gone to do this case. And one of the judges even said this penalty is very troubling. So I mean, there were 5 judges on the panel, and so it's going to depend what 3 of them decide. They either will reduce dramatically the fine, or they may kick the case entirely as just being completely out of the jurisdiction of the Attorney General to bring in because there was no dispute. Everybody was paid back in full.
Yeah, they made money.
There was nobody was harmed. It's the craziest thing, and I think the Court of Appeals was really struggling with what Judge Ingren had done.
Absolutely. Well, Matt Whitaker, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Always love having you on, Matt. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both.
And now we're going to bring in Jimmy Petronas to find out. He's the CFO of Florida. Find out what the heck is going on in Florida, and we pray for all people. Jimmy, tell us what's going on.
So we're recovering from Hurricane Helene. Hurricane Helene as a whole, it went through the Big Bend of Florida. This is the exact same path that Hurricane Idalia and Hurricane Debbie went through less than 12 months ago. So it's not a densely populated part of the state. The one side effect that Helene had, this is what I've been worried about, is the coastal areas, because of the counterclockwise motion, is what it can do to flooding on the rest of the coastal areas, like in St. Petersburg and Tampa and Pasco County and Tarpon Springs, that area, Sarasota. And so those areas definitely had more of a storm surge than they have ever experienced historically. So we've got some significant cleanup going on down there. But as for an impact of the state, we dodged a bullet in a lot of ways. It could have been a lot worse.
Florida got very lucky, I understand.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, if this storm had gone into a Tampa, that would be catastrophic considering what type of density that there is there. But what you did have is you had a storm surge, and this is something that if the storm was 100 miles offshore. Okay,
it's the winds that got it.
Well, the storm surge from that storm, 100 miles offshore, ended up creating the problems that we saw in a lot of these coastal communities. The winds did more damage in the northern part of the state. But it hit at the last minute. The storm went to the east by 25 miles, and that's why Tallahassee didn't get touched. That's why Apalachicola didn't get touched. Some of those other counties, Tallahassee fared well.
Oh, thank you so much, Jimmy Petronas, the CFO of Florida, the place where all New Yorkers are headed to.
I know. And you went on TV today, and you didn't even tell me about it. I had to hear about it from the rest of your fan club. Hey, and the last thing I'll tell you, Mr. John, I was in Fort Walton Beach earlier today, and I'm speaking to a group of people, and this guy comes to me. He says, I listen to you all the time. You're on Katz and Cosby. Here's a guy in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, who listens to your show live streaming. Anyway, you got fans everywhere.
Well, before we hang up, just how do you say, come on down?
Come on down.
Thank you, Jimmy Petronas, and we'll catch up again real soon.
Thank you, sir. Take care. Bye, Rita.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Let's take a break.
Yep, and we got the great Bill O'Reilly coming up. He's got some big stuff.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby, and joining us now is the great Bill O'Reilly. Of course, Common Sense with Bill O'Reilly every night here on WABC 9 to 10 p.m. And also, Bill, before we bring in, congrats, #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, Confronting the Presidents.
Well, I appreciate that, Rita. Thank you very much. It's the 19th time. It must give the Times great joy to see my name up there at the top of the list. What do you think?
I'm sure they're having a heart attack, but the numbers spoke for themselves. They couldn't do anything. Bravo to you, my friend. That's awesome. Let's get first to the VP debate. We've been talking about it. It's going to be different, a little bit of the format than the presidential. What can we expect? It's going to be, I think, a high stakes one tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's a little bit more important than usual because there's so much fluidity in the polling that even one or two swing points matters. So I had Vance on my show, as you know, on Common Sense on WABC. He answered the questions pretty directly. Walz got a lot of deficit, and it really depends if Vance can pin him down on what he thinks about open borders, what he thinks about inflation, rising so quickly under the Biden administration. Because I don't think the moderators will do that. They'll ask more general questions. So it's going to be up to Vance to try to put him on the defensive. I expect Walz to attack Vance on the migrant pets thing. On the cat lady thing, I think we'll see those recycled tomorrow night too.
Yeah, and the threats to democracy and a variety. Who do you think? Who's your bet on? And how do you think this is going to be different than the presidential in terms of style?
A little bit more bitter. I can't bet on anybody because I don't know Walz. I haven't seen him enough to know if he thinks quickly on his feet. I don't think either of those guys are going to persuade anybody. They're basically speaking to the choir guys. But it depends on how they go about confronting each other. That's what people are going to be looking at rather than advancing policy.
Yeah, Peter Navarro's in studio here, Pete.
Hey, Bill. Hey, how much will communist China factor in? Waltz has a long resume, sucking up to the Chinese, making money from them. J.D. Vance, when he was in Ohio, was a victim of communist Chinese aggression. Is that an issue to you, Bill?
I don't think it is. You'd have to have a pretty good dossier of what Walls specifically did in China, because his posture is, hey, it was just an exchange program. I was just bringing education to Minnesota and some investment from China. I don't think the American people, I think they're really pretty much locked in now on economics. If I were Vance, I'd go there. That's where I would put my emphasis on.
If I may, I mean, Waltz made a ton of money in China. They showered him with money.
You'd have to have that there. You made this amount of money.
Yeah.
How did you do it? And I expect he would deny that. But if Vance has got some ops that are saying that the guy made money that's not defined, then certainly you should throw that out.
He didn't shut down his business, Bill, until 6 months into his first term as a congressman. So anyway, it's there, but let's see what happens, his boss says.
By the way, there's a lot of material, too, to go after. Also, the weapons of war comment, too, the border comment. He sure doesn't seem – it seems like very much night and day in policies, but I agree with Bill that it's going to be Vance's job to correct and to state the record. Bill, you also –
once again, if Vance keeps it simple, like, okay, how would you stop the massive intrusion on the border, Governor? That's it. Keep it tight. Your running mate has failed to say, and which is absolutely true, how she'd bring down inflation. How would you do it? 10-second questions, pop, pop, pop. And you get a chance to do that because they have 2-minute rebuttals to everything. Each candidate has a chance to pose some questions. In that it's a debate is a little bit different than the presidential debate.
Yeah, and Bill, before we let you go, you also want to talk about what's going on in New York with Eric Adams.
Yeah, I think that Adams should hang tough. I wouldn't resign if I were him.
I agree with you on that, Bill, totally.
The due process thing, and he's got a right to present his case. New York Times wants him out because they want Williams in, because Williams is more radical left than Adams. But I heard from very reliable sources that no matter what happens, Andrew Cuomo is in. He's going to run against for mayor of New York City.
Wow. So what do you think is defining it for him? And by the way, if it turns out, it's probably going to be a crowded field, I would imagine, don't you think, Bill?
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter. Cuomo's got a lot of money and he's got the name. In a Democratic primary, he would win. And I do 5 minutes on this at the top of my show at 9 o'clock tonight, backing up my opinion with what the sources, who I can't obviously say who they are, but it makes perfect sense. And the headline is that Cuomo would rather run for governor because Hochul is so weak, but Letitia James already has that locked down. She will be the next governor of New York.
Letitia James?
You bet.
What, you mean running against Hochul?
Yep, she's going to challenge Hochul in primary.
Wow, so it'll be Letitia James, Bill is saying, against Hochul, and Cuomo running against Adams. Wow, right. We'll talk about it. But what did you make of the charges against Adams when they came down, Bill? Because it was like the Damian Williams, the U.S. attorney, spent like a few minutes on the straw donors, which is a serious offense, the foreign money and all that. But then he spent all this time talking about the bump ups, and the graph was about, getting bumped up from coach to first class. And, to me, it was like all over the place. It looked so thin on that stuff. I mean, people go, so what? He got a bump up on that part.
No, it was the quo. It wasn't the quit. So when I was at Chaminade High School, I had to take Latin. It's paying off for me now. It wasn't what he got bumped up to. It was what he did for the bump.
But he didn't do anything for 5 years. On the quid pro quo, you have to have intent. If they waited 5 years, they had no idea he was going to be mayor. They had no idea they were going to need a break from the building department. I think it would be hard to prove on intent, Bill. And without intent,
you're right.
And the Supreme Court McDonald case, they threw it out because of that.
That's true, but in the Justice Department's complaint, it's very specific that Adams ordered the building that Turks built to be opened, and there were violations.
That was 5 years after the supposed bribes were made. So there was no intent originally because nobody would have known that event was going to occur.
Yes, but in a court of law, if it can be proven by testimony from the fire officials, the New York City fire officials, that, yeah, they leaned on me. I had to do it.
That's just making a bribe.
He's in trouble.
It's called past consideration. The doctrine of law is called past consideration, and that doesn't count. It doesn't count in a civil case, and I respectfully submit it doesn't count in a criminal case.
That's from the judge of the Supreme Court.
Judge Weinberg.
He's smarter than I am. But
I don't know about that, but I think I'm right on this one.
I'm not arguing. I'm just saying that the Justice Department is hinging its case on Adams' insiders testifying against him that this was all you do this because we did that. That's what they got.
Your dog agrees, by the way.
And every time I say the word Justice Department, the dog barks.
I can understand that. When you're dealing with the Justice Department these days, I think everybody is barking.
Yes.
Well, Bill O'Reilly, thank you very, very much. Congrats again on the big bestseller. Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
I hope you guys enjoy Confronting the President. It's a good book, and we're very pleased that it opened at number 1.
Good luck on that, Bill.
It is awesome. Well deserved, my friend. Thank you so much, Bill. And also, by the way, Bob Unanue, congrats on your huge book, Blast, Donald J. Trump and the Spiritual War, and also you and your big book, The New MAGA Deal by Peter Navarro. Awesome. So great to have both of you guys here.
To be with you. Just a great show. I love coming here. It's beautiful.
You guys got to come back again. We loved having you here. And Bob, great to have both of you guys here. It was so awesome.
Congratulations on your ratings.
Thank you.
Number 1.
Well, it went higher with you guys in studio today. Thank you very much. And Pete and the judge.
And what do we all stand for?
Truth, justice, and the American way.
God bless America.